Hey, quick thing. If you like Bold and Boutique, could you hit that follow button on Spotify? It's right at the top of the show page. Super easy, and it seriously helps us to keep the show going ad-free and on our own terms. Thanks a ton. Now let's dive back into it.
All right, so we talked about the creative spark, the moment when concept artists take a blank canvas and transform it into ideas for virtual characters. In this episode, I want to focus a bit more on what happens next. So, how do those early ideas evolve into designs you want to test with users and eventually turn into fully realized AI characters for robots that brands can actually use?
Yeah, sounds good. So we briefly touched upon this topic in the last episode, but there's so much more to discuss when it comes down to refining a character. So taking a concept from an initial idea to like a polished persona crafted to be perceived in a specific manner isn't just about making it look believable, but you're really trying to paint a complete picture to make it work.
And that's where the next phase comes in, right?
Absolutely. The refinement process.
Can you give me a high level overview of what you and your team are doing in this part of the process?
Yes. So, first of all, when we talk about the refinement process, it might sound like this is the phase where everything comes together. But in reality, the refinement process or the refinement we do in this phase happens after we conduct qualitative research with users. So, this is before we conduct quantitative perception research. And the phase where everything truly comes together is what I would call the optimization phase, when we integrate like all the learnings and all the results from our perception research into an optimized character design.
Okay, I have a couple of follow-up questions here. Am I correctly understanding that you don't utilize character polishers to refine ideas before qualitative testing? And perhaps you can elaborate a bit more on what qualitative research actually is.
Sure. So, qualitative research is a type of research that explores and provides deeper insights into users' experiences, perceptions, emotions, and behavior. It answers the hows and the whys instead of how many and how much, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, so qualitative research focuses on getting an understanding of the deeper meaning behind the experiences and perception of people that you test with, rather than just counting occurrences or scoring evaluations.
Exactly. So it's all about the why and the how, diving into emotions and behaviors to get like a more richer, more nuanced understanding. It's extremely valuable when you study like perception and interaction, for example. And especially in this part of the process, because we're seeking like this deeper descriptive insight we can use to refine the most promising designs for like further research.
I understand, but you're not purely relying on qualitative data when you're designing a character or persona, right?
Well, in the refinement phase, we often solely rely on qualitative data and secondary research results. And secondary research results are findings derived from existing studies or literature rather than original research, which would be called primary research, for example. But as mentioned before, we also leverage quantitative data later in the process of designing characters and personas. So our comprehensive research is not a standalone study purely relying on qualitative data. We leverage like a mix methods research that combines qualitative and quantitative data.
Okay, so in the process of designing AI characters, you combine primary research, both qualitative and quantitative research, and secondary research results.
Yeah, and don't underestimate the importance of secondary research as well. It's always a good idea to turn over every stone before researching yourself or starting the research yourself. So, learning from other people and existing research can really define your own research goals and create focus.
Yeah, I was just thinking you are probably not the first person who wants to know how to signal professionalism. I mean, there are probably dozens of studies on how to come across as professional.
True. That's exactly my point. You can learn a lot from those studies, but don't just adopt their conclusions without careful consideration. Context is everything. So, what signals professionalism in one situation might be completely different in another one. So, always evaluate whether those insights apply to your specific case before incorporating them into your work.
That makes sense. So, when you evaluate existing research, how do you determine whether a particular finding is actually relevant to your specific project? Um, are there certain criteria or process you follow to filter out what's useful and what's not?
Yeah, so there are definitely a couple of things you can do to evaluate existing research. Most are quite obvious. So, for example, you should check who conducted the research and what was their goal. If the study comes from a credible source, of course, like a respected academic institution or an industry leader or perhaps someone you know, that's more likely to be like a trustworthy kind of study. And I think you should also pay close attention to the context and sample group. If the participants in a study don't align with your target audience, the insights may not be directly applicable. That said, it's rare to find a research or a study that is perfectly matches your exact context and demographic. But instead of looking for like a one-to-one match, you see studies as like inspiration. They can still provide valuable direction and can help you formulate like a strong, well-informed hypothesis.
And do you also analyze the methodology?
Oh, yes. Yeah. You check whether the research was qualitative, quantitative, or like a mix of both. It's also easy to review how large the sample size was, et cetera, et cetera. Like all these factors determine how much weight I give into the findings. But at the end of the day, secondary research results can guide refinement decisions, not dictate them. So the key is to extract the valuable insights while keeping like a critical eye on whether they truly fit your specific use case. Before we move on, first this. Hey, my name is Phoebe, and I'm one of the podcast hosts of Bold and Boutique. Are you looking to set up your own podcast? Come to podcastproducties.nl. They've got over 10 years of experience in production and only started this place a couple of months ago. I'm super happy to record Bold and Boutique here, so come around, check it out. Now let's get back to the show.
Now, before I want to zoom in on some basic concepts and definitions on how to apply and conduct qualitative research, I want to circle back to a question I touched upon before, which is how do you utilize character polishers exactly? I mean, do you use them to refine ideas before qualitative testing or only after?
Well, in practice, we can also leverage character polishers before qualitative research, but how extensively depends on factors such as the number of promising designs from our concept artists and the level of detail in their work. Because I think each project comes with its own set of available resources. So which partly influence how many designs we can include in our qualitative research. And to maximize the value of our qualitative insights, we often refine ideas beforehand, and this approach enhances the depth of understanding and strengthens the outcomes of the qualitative research, in my experience.
And the better the qualitative research results, the better the feedback, the better the character polishers can do their work based upon customer input.
Exactly. So this guides them in preparing the most promising and interesting designs for the quantitative research.
Makes sense. Okay, let's zoom in on some basic concepts of how you conduct qualitative research. You already explained the difference between qualitative and quantitative research a bit, and you told us that quantitative research is more about testing hypotheses and evaluations with structured data.
Yeah, so unlike quantitative research, qualitative research is more open-ended, and it relies on methods like interviews, focus groups, and observations to collect rich, detailed insights directly from people and users. So this makes it especially valuable when you're trying to uncover perspectives or understand how people truly interact with the design for an AI character or persona, for example.
So, qualitative and quantitative research could be seen as opposites from each other.
Yeah, but then again, in my experience, they actually work best together. Qualitative research helps to explain why themes in perception exist, while quantitative research can measure how important this theme is in relation to the overall evaluation. So, for example, if a quantitative test shows that people trust the character and persona of an AI driven virtual character, for example, qualitative research helps us to understand why they feel that way.
How do you conduct qualitative research?
So, as a UX or design researcher, the goal is to immerse yourselves in the lives, in the culture and behavior of the people in the target audience to understand their needs, perceptions, and expectations. You really want to get like a clear picture of how customers see and interpret various designs, why some may work better than others. But this is just like the beginning. You are not just trying to understand the customer, and the goal of the research is not just a report. It's creating like this shared reality between designers, stakeholders, and customers to make better design decisions. Because at the end of the day, all a design project basically is a series of decisions. Having said this, I think you also asked about how I conduct qualitative research, right? Well, that process is very simple and does not just apply to qualitative research, by the way. But let me give you like a high level overview. So you form questions, you gather the data, and analyze the data. And this process will give you insights that empower a meaningful and effective design process leading to success.
And do you think that all this research is needed to design a successful character or persona for an AI robot? I mean, it's quite thorough and extensive, and the approach might even seem almost academic.
Yeah, I think it's very important, especially when working with new technologies. Often people focus too much on the technology itself and not enough on the context in which it will be used. It's easy to get like caught up in the excitement of the innovation, but at the end of the day, it's humans who will interact with these AI robots or virtual brand ambassadors or these characters or personas that you design. So if we don't understand their perception and needs and expectations, we risk designing something that doesn't resonate or perhaps something that creates friction instead of engagement. The research is therefore really important for me to understand how customers perceive our designs and learn how to innovate and improve the user experience. If we don't take the time to learn how people actually perceive and interact with that AI-driven persona or character, how can we innovate in a way that resonates with customers? But on the other hand, I totally get why people sometimes hesitate, because research has this reputation for being slow, expensive, and overly academic. And if it just produces reports instead of like real results. But I think that's like a huge misconception. In reality, well conducted research is practical and very actionable. It helps us refine character design and reduce like costly mistakes down the line. It's not about like gathering data for the sake of it. It's about like making meaningful design decisions at the end of the day.
That makes sense. But for those who don't have a background in research, does this mean they need like formal training to conduct user research effectively? Such as, I don't know, would you say they need like an academic background, for example?
No, you don't need an academic background. You just need to be a good listener. I think designers and technology professionals can conduct effective research without having a degree. It probably won't even require a lot of training because a lot of them already have like this analytical skill. Just by asking the right questions in the right circumstances and doing some critical thinking, you can get pretty far and learn so much to fuel and inspire your work.
That sounds simple. You have to be a good listener, do some critical thinking, ask the right questions.
Yeah, it's simple, but don't underestimate it as well. So, for example, do you have any idea how hard it is to be a good listener?
Why is it hard to be a good listener?
Because people love being right and sometimes a little too much. Most of us have like this natural tendency to rush to conclusions or jump in with answers before fully understanding the question. We often assume we know what someone is going to say before they even finished speaking. And in doing so, we actually stop truly listening. I've learned that when you're too focused on being right, you end up answering questions before you've properly asked them, or worse, responding before the other person has even fully expressed their thoughts. It's an instinct I think many people have, but it comes with a cost. It makes you a terrible listener.
And what would you say? What makes a good listener?
I think true listening requires to actually slow down, setting aside your assumptions and giving space for real understanding to unfold. So it's really about the curiosity and the patience and the active engagement.
Do you have some tips on how to become a better listener in research?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, first of all, you should be open to unexpected insights rather than just confirming assumptions. So, many people listen with the intent to reply, but a good listener focuses on truly understanding what the other person is trying to communicate before forming a response. And also be comfortable with silence. And perhaps more importantly, try to make sure everyone in the conversation is feeling comfortable with silence. I mean, why rush to fill the gaps in a conversation? You can take pauses and give people time to reflect. And often, most valuable insights come after a moment of silence when, like, the participant or the user feels the need to elaborate.
Yeah, from a participant point of view, I can imagine that a silence would create like a natural urge to, I don't know, fill the gap, to explain yourself further, and to elaborate on your thoughts.
Definitely, using pauses correctly often signals an unspoken invitation to clarify or expand or reveal something deeper. And I think users and participants may then share insights with you that you've otherwise have maybe missed.
Okay. What else?
I got three more. So the first one is about confirmation bias. So many people listen in a way that reinforces what they already believe, but good listeners challenge their own assumptions. So in research, focus on patterns and contradictions rather than cherry picking information that supports pre existing ideas. It's also very important to pay attention to like nonverbal cues. Like listening isn't just about words, it's about tone, body, language, emotional cues. I think listeners pick up on what's not being said as much as what is being said. So sometimes it's less about what someone says and more about how they say it. And this is key in user research where people may not always be able to explicitly state their frustration or perceptions or preferences.
This is very important when you're asking people how they perceive certain voices and personality characteristics.
Exactly. But it's not as important as keeping your ego in check. Always remember that research is about learning, not proving a point. So if you want to be a good listener, you need to let go of the need to be right, which will give you discomfort and uncertainty at first, but that's part of that learning process. Before we get back to it, here is something you might find interesting. Most brands have a story, but stories built for humans don't always translate when machines are doing the talking. Voice branding builds design systems and frameworks to design and build AI solutions that look, sound, speak, write, and respond in a way that feels consistently on brand. Whether it's a chatbot, a voice assistant, product, or an in-app interaction, your story holds up. Make sure your solutions aren't just email me at phoebe@voicebranding.ai. That's PHOEBE@voicebranding.ai. And let's talk. All right, let's pick up where we left off.
Okay, and besides being a good listener, you need to be able to ask the right questions in the right circumstances to do good research. You mentioned this before. So, how do you ask the right questions?
When we talk about asking the right questions, we should first distinguish research questions from questions you ask participants in an interview, because these questions are not the same. Your research questions are very important because they determine your results. I mean, it makes no sense for you just to review data without any research questions in mind. The only thing that gives your research meaning is your research questions. So these questions need to be very, very good questions.
Yeah, actually, quite often you hear that people are doing a study without actually knowing what they want to find out.
Yeah, I think it's not the best way to do it. Let's put it like that. But you have to know what makes your study successful or not. What questions are you trying to answer?
So, what makes a good research question?
A good research question is clear, not generic, and practical. It should really precisely define what you need to know, outline how you can find the answer, and you should ensure that you have the resources to investigate it effectively.
Do you have an example of a good research question?
Well, let me formulate two questions. So, question number one: how do we get Gen X to like our BMW brand voice? Question number two: how do BMW drivers in their 40s who use their car for business evaluate the voice of their BMW in-car assistant in terms of trust? Which one do you think is better?
I'd say the second one.
It's better because it's more specific, clear, and actionable. But the best research questions in general focus on critical unknowns that carry the biggest potential risk.
Okay. Let's circle back to asking the right questions in the right circumstances. Can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, there are some fundamental principles to keep in mind when asking questions to participants or users. Instead of leading questions that push for a specific answer, it's really crucial to ask open-ended, non-biased questions that allow participants really to fully express their feelings, their perspective, etc., etc. In my experience, the best insights come from real experiences rather than hypotheticals. That's why it's always more effective to discuss a user experience the participant has just gone through. Their firsthand reactions and observations provide a far richer insights than theoretical scenarios, for example. And another key approach is to encourage participants to really explain their thinking. So you might even ask them to think out loud while interacting with the character or virtual assistant that you've designed. And use follow-up questions like, what makes you say that? Or can you tell me more about that? That really help uncover the reasoning behind their responses rather than just their service level opinions. But having said this all, asking the right questions is just as important as listening.
Okay, so you are saying there is no one right activity or method.
No, there isn't. We always refine and adjust our methods based on specific project needs and target audiences. So at some point, certain things work better than others. But in general, there's no right method or activity for what you want to find out.
Okay. And what's the next step? I mean, let's say we conducted qualitative research and we've studied secondary research results. What do we do next?
Then it's time for the character refiners to familiarize themselves with the feedback and get to work. So at this point, they got input on how a relatively small group of customers perceive the designs. They also know how the designs were intended to come across. They know which designs are going into the right direction, and they can formulate hypotheses on how to improve those designs before quantitative research in like a meaningful manner.
And do you have any examples of results or things they would refine on a character?
At this stage, the main goal is to ensure that the character's look, voice, and personality align with both the intended perception profile and customer expectations and customer perception. So it's about bridging the gap between what stakeholders and designers and customers envision and how customers actually perceive the character through the voice, the looks, the tone, etc., etc. So having a strong idea and understanding of what customers like is one thing, but translating that into a character that is actually perceived as intended is a completely different challenge. Like refinement focuses on making adjustments based on real customer feedback to refine characters to make them resonate in a way it was designed to. So character refiners make visual adjustments, for example, to make the character's expression, styling, or motion feel more friendly. If this is something the character could improve upon according to customers. They might also suggest voice and tone tweaks to make it match the personality of the character and brand identity from like a customer perspective. Perhaps the voice is too soft, too high-pitched, robotic, or maybe too expressive even. So like all these little things matter. And character refiners might even change the personality or simplify if it's what the data suggests to make the character design feel more relatable or on brand.
So you're saying that a character polisher might simplify a character, which at first sounds a bit weird because the role is about refining and enhancing the design, right?
Yeah, I get that. But simplifying can be a form of refinement. Like simplification in character design isn't just about like removing depth. Sometimes refinement is about focusing on what truly matters. So by removing like unnecessary complexities, you allow the most important traits, whether it's like visual, vocal, or personality driven, to shine through. And I think simplicity sometimes enhances clarity and emotional impact, making the character feel more effective in its role.
What are some of the challenges that character polishers face at this stage?
Well, a general challenge at this stage is often stakeholders and concept artists to have an intended vision for the character, but that doesn't always match how customers actually perceive it. And designers in general, including character polishers, need to bridge the gap between vision and perception. For example, a brand might intend for an AI character to sound confident, but customers may perceive the same tone as arrogant. So, based on research findings, character polishers can adjust the tone, the voice to ensure the character is actually perceived as confident from a customer's perspective. However, this raises a key challenge. Will stakeholders and concept artists agree with these changes? Will they perceive the refinements as an improvement? Or will they feel that something essential has been lost in translation? So, balancing user insights with creative and brand expectations is like a delicate process that is definitely an interesting challenge. But what's also challenging is the fact that the qualitative research results provide customer understanding and direction results. It provides like knowledge based on upon which you can make meaningful decisions for character refinement. But this part of the research doesn't give you any significant correlations or proof.
So, what do you refine before quantitative research and not after?
Oh, yeah, we also refine after quantitative research, but we call this part of the process the optimization phase. So, we refine before quantitative research because we want to conduct quantitative tests with the most promising and interesting group of designs you have, like refined concepts based on qualitative research results, providing like a more meaningful result in the end and opportunities for optimization. Thinking about launching a virtual influencer, brand avatar, or artificial spokesperson, we've helped global teams explore what's possible and design what's next. Perhaps you'd also be interested in our virtual influencer and AI character half-day intro workshop, or a multi-day design bootcamp, or a cohort course built for in-depth approaches and design. Visit boldenboutique.com for more information. We'll leave it here for this episode. My name is Phoebe, and see you soon.